Welcome to Train Signal. I'm Chris Bryant, CCIE number 12933, and this is the wireless basics and standards video, plus a little bit of intranets and extranets thrown in at the end to conclude the instructional portion of your course. And as you take a look at the whiteboard and the topics we're going to cover here, again, this is really an overview of wireless basics, some standards you need to know about for the exam and to work with wireless in the real world. We're going to talk about Bluetooth a little bit, IrDA, spread spectrum, and again, if these are all terms that you're unfamiliar with, that's fine. I can guarantee you will be familiar with them in just a few minutes. Before we get started on those wireless basics, though, I do want to say that along with security, this is one of the fastest growing areas of information technology. And it's hard to believe there was once a dark age back when we rode our dinosaurs up and down hills to school both ways in the snow, that we actually had to have a cable go from our laptops and our PCs to an outlet. Isn't that amazing? And it really wasn't that long ago. And now, of course, we take it absolutely, totally for granted that we can go to a coffee shop or we can go to the mall or really just anywhere now if you have a national wireless access card, that you can go anywhere in your country or anywhere in the world and access a wireless network relatively easily. So, of course, along with that goes some security concerns, which we talked about in the security protocols video. But again, I urge you, once you're done nailing the Network Plus exam, to take your study of wireless to the next level. Because again, between wireless and security, if you have specialties in both those areas, you really absolutely can't go wrong. So let's start talking about those wireless basics. And first off, with how we build a wireless network to begin with, or what the terms are. Wireless networks are created by configuring and then connecting wireless access points. Now, I put WAP there, and that is by far the more common abbreviation. But sometimes when you're looking at wireless documentation, it's assumed that you know that everything on there is wireless. So you'll see something marked as AP, and I don't want that to throw you. That's an access point. So if you see WAP or AP, they both mean a wireless access point. And it's these wireless access points that we can connect and create a wireless network. And one term you hear occasionally that I do want to give to you, and again, I don't want it to throw you the first time you hear it, is lily pad network. Because what we've got really are a series of wireless access points that are connected, but not in any planned manner as far as geography goes. Because let's face it, I mean, we've got wireless access points popping up all the time, and of course communities that get mad because they don't want a wireless tower in their neighborhood, etc. So that's where the term lily pad network comes from. There's just this pattern of wireless access points that are connected together, much like you can have a pattern of lily pads in a pond that really doesn't follow any set geometric shape, but they are related in some fashion. We're going to connect those to make our wireless network. Now, the wireless access points in such a lily pad network can be, and often are, owned by different companies. And these WAPs create hotspots, and I'm sure you've heard that term. It's like, I know certain coffee shops and certain other businesses advertise themselves as internet hotspots where you can open your laptop, tap their network, and connect to the internet. But WAPs are not actually a required part of a wireless network. Two different terms to introduce you here as far as we're talking about whether a wireless access point is involved or not in a WLAN or a wireless LAN. And in documentation, and especially on your exam, I don't think this is a worry, but I want to mention it to you anyway, don't get WLAN and VLAN mixed up. VLAN is our virtual LAN that we talked about configuring on our switches, and of course the WLAN is a wireless local area network. Well, in an ad hoc network, no wireless access point is going to be involved. It's going to look much like this, where we've got a wireless signal coming out and laptops can hit it or a PC can hit it, but we do not have wireless access points involved in any fashion. What we're much more familiar with is an infrastructure where wireless access points are actually involved. Let's take a look at one of those. Something like this. This is what we're much more familiar with, where the laptops or PCs can hit a wireless signal that's sent out by the WAPs and then they are connected either to a network switch or to an ISP to get you out to the internet. Wireless access points also make it relatively simple to extend the availability of your network as the company grows, because frankly, as you add personnel, as you expand your office, maybe you get different office locations in the same building, you just add wireless access points to add those new users to the network. Now we got to revisit a little bit of memorization here and some wireless standards that you should be familiar with, because along with the explosion of wireless is a rapidly expanding range of wireless standards. And some of these standards play well together, others do not. But let's take a look at the typical data rates and the max speeds of 4 particular wireless networking standards. And these are all part of the 802.11x family from the IEEE. 802.11a has a typical data rate of 25 meg. It can reach speeds of 54 meg. Its indoor range is 100 feet, and you should know that the operating frequency is 5 gigahertz. 802.11b, the typical data rate is 6.5 meg. It can reach speeds of 11 meg, has an indoor range of 100 feet, and the frequency there is 2.4 gigahertz. 11G has a typical rate of 25 meg, a peak data rate of 56 meg, an indoor range of 100 feet, and a frequency of 2.4 gig. I'm going to change one value on there as far as that peak rate goes, because you see 54 and you see 56. I don't think they're going to split that hair on your Network Plus exam, but I would be prepared to see that as 54 meg for a peak rate. The reason I mentioned B and G there together is that these two particular standards are compatible to the point where many wireless routers and many wireless cards that use these standards are actually referred to as 802.11b/G or simply B/G, but they are two separate standards. Now, you might have thought, working around an office, if you're in an office, you know what it's like when somebody pops popcorn in the microwave, right? Nobody ever watches it, and they always leave it there too long, and it burns, and then the office smells like burned popcorn for the next couple hours. And you may be wondering right now, what does this have to do with any wireless standards? So I'm going to tell you, because you may have thought that's the only way that the microwave ovens can be annoying, but it's not, because microwave ovens also share the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band. And the presence of a microwave in an office can actually cause wireless connectivity issues. I've seen it. I've actually seen it when we were using 802.11b in an office. It was fine until we tried to get some users able to connect to the network that were on the other side of a microwave. It really was amazing. When we moved the microwave, the problem actually stopped. So that is something you actually have to watch, the presence of a microwave oven. And of course, solid objects, a wall or another building, that can disturb the signal in any frequency. But watch that 2.4 gigahertz band with microwave ovens. Interesting stuff. It's always something. Now, 802.11n, you might have heard a little something about this when it came out, just a little bit of hype. And actually, when you look at the basics, you can see why. A typical data rate of 200 meg, a peak data rate of 540 meg, indoor range of 160 feet, and the frequency could be 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. So you could even skirt around that 2.4 issue if you wanted to. Now, the reason I put pre-N and then put a question mark in, I get asked a lot, well, what's this pre-N stuff that was in the stores a while back? You don't see as much of it now because 11N is an official frequency. Well, this was so anticipated, and the technology existed for it, but it had not been officially put into place or approved, if you will, by the IEEE. So certain vendors came out, Belkin actually came out with them, and some other vendors did too, I'm not just picking on them, with what they called pre-N routers that were supposed to be able to reach these speeds. And having used one, it was very efficient. So you shouldn't really see too many pre-N routers in the stores or anything anymore, because now 11N is an official frequency for us to use, or an official standard, I should say. But in case you see pre-N on any cards or anything that you're working on, that's why they're called pre-N. They should meet these standards, but it came out before 11N was official. Bluetooth is officially known as the IEEE standard 802.15.1, so you can see that we're glad we can call it Bluetooth. And this actually allows the creation of a PAN, a personal area network. And basically a PAN is like your own little personal local area network, and it can contain PDAs, it can contain PCs, printers, video game consoles, digital cameras. I mean, what you can do with Bluetooth really is quite amazing. Almost all of it beyond the scope of Network Plus. But if you want to go out and do a little Googling or search engine searching on your own to learn more about Bluetooth, I think it's a great idea. It does run at 2.4 gigahertz, and you might notice that we've mentioned that frequency quite a bit here. And I want to reiterate the max transmission speed here of Bluetooth at this time is 720 kbps, not mbps. This does not run at 720 meg per second. I mentioned that simply because everything we've talked about up to this point has been in meg. You got to watch that for your exam in particular. Watch the difference between kbps and mbps. Bluetooth runs at 720k. You don't hear as much about infrared as you did a few years ago, and the main reason is the range. And having worked with it, it does kind of give you skittish results, kind of different results from time to time. But you should know about the IrDA, the Infrared Data Association. Now this is another body, much like IEEE, that defines the network specifications and standards. But the IrDA is concerned, as you see by their name, with standards for transmitting data over infrared light. Now, the standard IrDA 1.0 had a range of 1 meter and a data rate of only 115K. And that's not too good. Now, IrDA 1.1 has a range of 1 meter, but a data rate of 4 meg, which is better. And it works okay. Like I said, with wireless advancing the way it is, I don't think infrared's ever going to be as big as we might have thought it was going to be at one time. Those two standards are compatible, so you can tell Microsoft didn't invent them, right? But keep in mind that neither IrDA standard has anything to do with wireless radio frequencies, only infrared light streams. And to run 1.1, the IrDA website notes that to even reach or even approach that 4 meg throughput speed, not only does the hardware have to be IrDA 1.1 compliant, but your software might actually have to be modified. That doesn't sound like much fun because it's not, which is another reason infrared is just probably never going to take off. Not the way we thought it would there for a while. Spread spectrum. If you're a fast reader or you're looking ahead, you're looking at some of the names of these things and you're like, oh my gosh, do not worry about them. They are important for your exam. They are important to understand how wireless works, but they are not complex. So give yourself a little time with these. Now, what is spread spectrum to begin with? Well, it refers to a method of spreading the signal. You know, the name is the recipe. We're going to spread the signal over a range or a spectrum of frequencies. And one popular method of doing this is FHSS, which is frequency hopping spread spectrum. What actually happens there is that the sender and the receiver agree in advance on the range of frequencies to use, and during the transmission, the signal will be sent over that entire range. But it's going to be one frequency at a time, you know, a little bit of data over this frequency, then we're going to switch to this frequency, then we're going to switch to another frequency, kind of like that. Now, in contrast, DSSS, the direct sequence spread spectrum, the signal is not going to hop around from one frequency to another. And that's the key here. You don't want to just memorize the acronyms. Memorize what the names of these things are because they really tell you how they operate. Frequency hopping, FHSS, is going to go from one frequency to another during the transmission. Well, direct sequence is not going to hop around from one frequency to another. It's going to spread the signal over the entire range of frequencies at one time. So it's a direct transmission. It's going out at one time It's going to use the entire range of frequencies. Finally, OFDM, and let's see if we can pronounce this together, the orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. That's what OFDM is. Now, what is it? The signal is actually going to be split into fragments, and the fragments are then sent out over different frequencies at the same time. Now, as you'll see in a moment, the earlier wireless standard used OFDM, but since then it's pretty much been either FHSS or DSSS. Now, why do we go through all this? Why do we go through having all those different methods, those three different methods? Well, why do we do spread spectrum in the first place? Well, we have three major reasons we do it. First, there's an increased resistance to noise. Because remember, this is wireless. I mean, we've got all kinds of noises out there. If you knew that a microwave oven might cause trouble before you watch this video, kudos to you. But most people don't realize that we've got all kinds of things out there that can disrupt a wireless signal that we don't have to worry about when we're sending a signal through the cable. I mean, we don't have to worry about the weather. We don't have to worry about whether it's raining or not when we're sending a signal through a cable. But through wireless, you know, anything can make noise. So we've got increased resistance to that environmental noise when we're using spread spectrum. This also allows the sharing of the frequency band, and it makes the signal much more difficult to intercept. And of course, that's always a concern with today's networks. Now, speaking of allowing sharing of the frequency band, let's take a look at the 2.4 gigahertz band, for example. Bluetooth 11B, 11G, and 11N either use that bandwidth or can use that bandwidth. So through the use of spread spectrum with Bluetooth using FHSS and the other three, B, G, and N, all using DSSS, by sharing the frequency, they can use it at the same time. You know, there's a sharing of that frequency band, where if we didn't have that, we'd have a real mess. We'd have four different technologies, four different standards, all trying to use the band at the same time. And as I mentioned here, the one frequency I didn't mention is 11.A. That's the one that uses OFDM. One more part of a wireless network we need to address here, though, are our antennas. And we have two major types of antennas in wireless networks, Yagi and Omni. Now, the Yagi antenna, Yagi is actually short for Yagi-Uda. Not sure what Mr. or Mrs. Uda did there to get dropped off. There you go. The Yagi antenna is going to send a signal in a single direction. It is unidirectional. These antennas, to do their job, must be absolutely, correctly, positively aligned, and realigned, and realigned, and realigned. Because what they're actually going to do is connect our wireless access points. They're very helpful in bridging the distance between the wireless access points. They're sometimes called directional antennas or point-to-point antennas. And again, since the signal is going to be very strong in a point-to-point or a unidirectional signal, that's what we're going to use to actually link our wireless access points. But let's face it, when you and I go out, let's say that I hop in the car, someone else is driving, because obviously I should not be on the internet and drive at the same time. Someone else is driving and I decide I need to check my email. So I fire up my laptop. I do have a national access wireless card, put that in. Well, the company that I'm with has absolutely no idea where I am. There's no way they can send me a unidirectional signal. So what they do is use an Omni antenna, Omni short for omnidirectional, and that is going to send a signal in all directions, much like a radio tower does. A radio tower does not, unicast a signal to your car radio. It sends a signal everywhere and just hopes you pick it up. Well, that's what an Omni antenna does. And when it comes to hosts like you and I connecting to a wireless access point, that's where an Omni antenna comes in. We've got to hit the signal that is sent out by an Omni antenna. CSMA/CA. Now, you may not be as familiar with this one as you are at this point with CSMA/CD, which is collision detection used by Ethernet. But wireless networks can use CSMA/CA with the A standing for avoidance. Now, they work mostly the same way, and since they begin with CSMA, I'm just going to refer to them as CD and CA. They work much the same way. Hosts have to listen before they transmit. If the channel is idle, the host can transmit. If the channel is busy, the host has to wait. The major difference is that there is no jam signal on a wireless network. So collisions are avoided on wireless networks, but not detected. So it sounds like we're splitting hairs there, but we're really not. There is that difference there. No jam signal with CA. And the one thing I would warn you about is just to watch that on your exam. Not because CompTIA is going to try to trick you, quite the opposite. It's a very straightforward exam. But it's really easy when you've been reading about CSMA CD for a while, whether it's been a few days, few weeks, few months, and all of a sudden you got CSMA CA. Just watch that on the exam. Don't say CD when you mean to say CA, and vice versa. As you can see, it's even difficult to say. But just make sure you keep those straight on exam day. CA is for wireless networks and CD is for Ethernet. We're going to wrap this particular video up with a quick discussion of intranets and extranets. And there are some people, talking real world here, there's some people who feel these just aren't really worthwhile definitions, or they're just buzzwords, but I think you should know them. They are used quite a bit in network documentation, other manuals that you may read, and they just also might be on your exam, so that couldn't hurt either. So if I mention internal users here, I'm talking about users who work for a corporation, and external users, users who work for another company. Could be a partner, could be a vendor, anything like that at all. Well, first, let's define intranet. Now, we talked earlier about an RFC 1918 address being a private address. Well, an intranet is a private network. It's really like a private internet. You're going to have all your usual internet protocols, HTTP and FTP up on the whiteboard. You're going to be using all your other ones. Those are all supported on intranets. But access to an intranet is restricted to internal users who must authenticate in some fashion to use that intranet. A good example is a large bank that I once did some call center support for, and they had their own little tech support intranet. And you and I, as outside users, even if we were customers of the bank, we could not possibly get to these web pages. They were on the bank's intranet. And even if we found the login page somehow, we'd still have to authenticate, and we would not be able to do so. Where when I was an internal user working for that bank, I had no problem. I could just call it up right on my screen, and did many times. But that's what an intranet is really all about. It's really like a private internet. It's really a corporate internet under a single administrative control. Intranets typically don't use the public telecommunication system to grant access, but they can. I have seen intranets that have a public web page that external users can access, but to get past that, you have to be an internal user. You have to be able to authenticate. Well, to me, once you get to that point where external users have the ability to access even a little bit of it, you're talking about an extranet. And all an extranet is an intranet that shares some or all of its contents with trusted partners, with vendors, whoever they want to set up to be able to be authenticated. And this sharing can be done via the public telecommunication system. So, again, there's not really a whole lot more to talk about as far as the intranet and extranet goes. But these are terms you hear fairly often in networking, especially intranet. And again, an intranet is simply a private internet, if you will. And that's going to conclude this particular video and actually the instructional portion of this course. Now, I've created a bonus video that's going to be available to you on this CD, and it's going to give you some tips on how to prepare best for the exam and to perform your best on exam day. And that's really a part of passing certification exams that I've always found is greatly overlooked, because we can do all the studying we want to, we can do all, hands-on practice, whatever we're doing to get ready for this exam, but it's like studying the playbook if you're an athlete, if you're a football player. You can study the playbook all you want to, but if you're not ready to play on the big day, then knowing the plays is only going to help you so much. So I do hope that you'll take a few minutes to watch that video, use some of the tips. I've got a pretty good record with written certification exams like the one you're going to be taking. So I think a few of these tips that I can pass on to you, my years of experience in taking these exams, will be helpful to you. In the meantime, I want to thank you sincerely for choosing the Bryant Advantage and Train Signal for preparing you for success on your Network Plus exam. I really enjoyed putting this course together. I hope you enjoy taking it as much as I enjoyed giving it to you. So again, to get the most out of the videos, you definitely want to watch each one more than once. No one absorbs all of this material at one time. No one. And it always sinks in better the second, especially the third time around. So I hope that you'll do that with each one of the videos. Take your time. The Network Plus exam is going to be there. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the exam prep video. So again, give that a listen when you get the chance. But again, I thank you for your business. I thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the course.